Chance for oh, I'll start over since we did doing the recording. So welcome everybody to our event on voter suppression. I just want to open up by welcoming myself. My name is Rashad Pearson. I'm the chair for RASR, that's Resolutions Addressing Systemic and Structural Racism. We're a relatively new organization, just forming and getting everything, organization together. We partner with other organizations, such as Center for Common Ground, which we have some guests for that today, who will be our main speakers for that, who will speak further on voter suppression. And just to get started, I'll tell you guys a little bit about our organization, RASR. So our vision is to be the catalyst for the change we seek. Our mission is to provide data, support, and resources to identify systemic and structural racism for the purpose of education and aiding in the elimination of societal racism. And our objectives are to build relationships and partnerships to support change, research, and provide input for legislative and policy changes, and to be the hub for information and resources to continue to advance economic fairness, equity, and ensure the health and safety of all people. So that's kind of our vision, mission, and objectives that we're founded on. From that, we have some 7 pillars that we have built our organization, like topics, advocacy topics that we built our organization to kind of, our short-term viewpoint at. So those pillars are economics and financial. So we want to identify how historical racism and economic disparities have impeded in the creation of intergenerational wealth, access to capital, economic and financial literacy. Second pillar is education and outreach and partnership. We want to provide outreach to like-minded organizations, societal media platforms, and leaders to serve as a resource for communities to learn about advocacy and allyship as it pertains to justice and anti-racism. Our next pillar is health and wellness. Identify structural and systemic barriers to equitable access to medical, health, wellness resources and practices. Acknowledge general trauma resulting from systemic and pervasive racism. Our next pillar is housing and evictions. And that's to narrow the gap, or to narrow and close the housing and eviction racial gap and decrease the overall eviction numbers. We want to address the redlining and housing discrimination practices. Particularly for that one in Virginia, that's one of the worst housing and eviction states in the entire country. Our next pillar is justice and law enforcement. We want to identify ways to address systemic and structural racism, bias relating to law enforcement and communities they serve, help change the culture and build communities of trust. Our next pillar is legislation and policy. We want to identify where structural laws, rules, and official practices and systemic societal policies and practices racism continues to exist and work to eliminate and replace harmful actions. And our last pillar, this pillar is centered around this event tonight, is reparations and redress. And so our description of that is to redress and reconcile past and current racial injustices. Repair includes restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. And so tonight on our event on voter suppression that falls under that pillar, it's a big reparation and redress item there. So again, that's just a little bit of our organization, kind of like the basis of that. We want to go into the next part. Do you want to do the introductions, Melissa, or is that?
Yes, we can go ahead and do that.
All right.
But before we did that, thank you. Rashad is our chairperson, if he didn't mention that before, of the board of directors for RASR. And I did want to do just a few housekeeping things. Please, if you have any questions or items that you want to share, put them in the chat. We will get to those as best we can throughout the event. And if you can keep yourself on mute while the speakers are talking, that will also be very, very helpful. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So there will be time to be able to talk to the guests and get their ideas about voter suppression and how to tackle it. So we are pleased tonight to be able to have some very distinguished guests with us tonight to talk about this issue. And as we know, voter suppression can take many forms. It can be overt, it can be covert, it can be very, under the radar. We have to know what we're looking for and know how we can identify it and tackle it. So one of the organizations that is doing a very good job of that is the Center for Common Ground. And we'll be hearing about how this organization is working with the communities and on the ground to identify what's happening, where there is voter suppression, and how they can help enable each community to be positioned to fight that and counter any voter suppression efforts. So we'll be hearing from 3 of the leaders in that organization tonight. And at the top of the list is Ms. Andrea Miller, who is the founding board member, executive director, People Demanding Action, the founding president, National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia, and a member of the Democracy and Governance Working Group of the Virginia Green New Deal. She's also an IT and political director, a digital and election strategist, and our go-to person with all things technical, I know, in my world. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for what she does. Secondly, we have Frank Mosley, who is also with us. He's the National Democracy Center Director. He's a certified financial literacy instructor. He's founder of the Social Education for Economic Development Initiative, which is Seed for All. And it's an organization that works to remove barriers that adversely impact the economic growth for low to moderate income communities and people of color in underserved communities. He's also a RASR board member. And third, we have Ernest C. Rentz II. We call him EC. And he is the coordinator for the Huntsville, Alabama Democracy Center. He's also co-chair of the Alabama Voter Registration, Education, and Mobilization Committee for Omega Psi Phi, and I have a hard time getting that out, Fraternity Incorporated, a member of the 7th District of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, VREM Committee. He's also the former state director of Alabama Opportunity Programs and former executive director of the North Alabama Sickle Cell Foundation. And he's also a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. We will also provide, like I said, a question and answer time at the end of this, and also contact information for the speakers if folks would like to talk to them. So it is my pleasure at this time to turn the spotlight over to Ms. Andrea Miller, who will talk with us about Center for Common Ground, what they're doing to fight voter suppression.
Thank you very, very much, Melissa. I've got a little presentation. I will show that, and then we will work away on that, so people will get a chance to learn a little more about Center for Common Ground. These are some of our democracy centers around the country. Now, we don't just do one thing around voting. We've got an internship program. I'll be talking about the democracy centers. We run the Reclaim Our Vote campaign, where we text and phone bank remotely into our focus states. We run the vote equality. One of our board members runs that. So we've got a 27-foot RV that runs around the southeastern United States. It will be back in Virginia at the end of October. And in presidential years, we run a big billboard campaign. Our mission is very simple. We want to educate and empower underrepresented voters in voter suppression states. Traditionally, think Virginia, go south around the Atlantic, come around and head west from Florida, hit Alabama, Texas, and then swing north, well, Georgia, swing north, and then go into Arizona. So because our work is year-round, when it's election season, we're engaging in elections. When it's not election season, then we help people understand how they can advocate for the right to vote and any other rights that they need. And the whole idea is that when we all work together, we can build a democracy that prioritizes the voice of all people, not just some. We are a community of color-led organization. There's my board of directors. And we do a lot of work. In 2020, we had 44,000 volunteers. We contacted 14 million voters, sent 9.4 million postcards, and 2.9 million text messages, and made 1.7 million phone calls. In this upcoming midterm election, we are going to need to beat those numbers. And one of the things that's really important is working with people on the ground in communities that have given up on voting, where they believe their vote doesn't matter, and people will even say that to you. Now, why do democracy centers work? Well, we have a lot of data. We know who does vote, we know who didn't. And most importantly, they're community centric, they're staffed by people who live in the community, who are trusted. And what they work on doing is identify local pain points. What do we need to fix, improve in our community? And then start helping people figure out what is it going to take to fix this. Our Democracy Center in Hawkinsville ran a feeding program once a month. Well, people from the community came to the Democracy Center leaders and said, well, you know, we're hungry like 7 days a week. So the Democracy Center started a feeding program. They opened up Rose's Food Pantry. And now they're actually teaching healthy cooking and meal prep to the folks who come there. So we meet communities where they are. We listen to what they need and where they're trying to go. And then we help provide community support. We understand that every community has some common issues, and every community is unique. And we work with communities to identify their issues, and then we write them down. And instead of canvassing and talking about candidates or political parties, when people knock on doors or go to events, they talk about what they'd like to improve in their community. Does it work? Yes, it does. Now, in 2021, this is early voting turnout purely for Black voters. Roanoke had an 18.21% Black early vote turnout. Fairfax County, which is in Northern Virginia, and I never dreamed I would have a democracy center up there, had 8.55. In what world is Roanoke beat Fairfax by 10 points? Well, when there is a democracy center and there isn't, and people in communities are having real conversations with their neighbors. Now, in Amelia County, down in Southside, we saw 53.68% early voting turnout among Black voters. Why? Well, because in Amelia County, not everybody votes in schools. Some people vote in granaries. And there isn't exactly a law that says, well, you know, you can't have a gun within so many feet of a granary. So once people were like, wait a minute, I can go vote and I can go vote now. Color me voting now. Because remember, in 2021, early voting with no excuse was brand new. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to show what our democracy centers have done in the past. what they will be working on is we've encouraged people to work polls. We've encouraged people to be poll watchers. And Melissa loves our election problem reporting tool. See something, say something. I will be here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I know there is so much more we need to talk about, but I do want to turn it next to Frank Mosley, because he's taking this down to the next level as we're getting closer and closer to the ground. So Frank, take it away. I will spotlight you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you, Andrea. As always, you are a champion of the cause and such an eloquent speaker when it comes to articulating our issues and our resolutions for those. As been mentioned earlier, I am not only a director for the Center for Common Ground, I am also a member of RASR as a board member, excuse me. And one of the things that really connected us together was the Center for Common Ground. It's because of the Democracy Center program and my involvement into the Democracy Center program that allowed me to reach out and meet organizations like RASR and be able to establish these partnerships to have an impact in these same underserved communities that we are all trying to uplift. I think that when we are looking at what the Center for Common Ground was able to do as providing civic education, as far as providing civic engagement, and we're talking about boots on the ground and our different democracy centers and what we're capable of, the outreach and the presence that we have in each one of those communities, Andrea alluded to earlier, every community has their own specific needs and their own specific issues and concerns. And what we do that is very unique is that we make sure that we are understanding, identifying those issues, as she had stated earlier, their pain points. And as Democracy Center leaders, one of the things that we make sure that we do is try to alleviate some of those pain points with resources. Our organizations partner with a number of different entities and businesses as well as nonprofits. And whatever we can find that will help, whether it's mutual benefit, whether it's, as she talked about, the food pantry providing food, whether it's during the wintertime, we've been able to do clothing drives. During school time, we do back to school drives. During Thanksgiving, we do turkey drives. We go out and we meet the community where they are, and we understand what it is by having those conversations that they are sometimes reluctant to have. And by doing that, we have a better understanding of what it is that is really plaguing them as a community. And once we can understand that issue, we can start looking at solutions. Now, when we talk about voter suppression and we look at all the things that we are combating across the country, you have some states that are not allowing people to pass out water in the lines to try to prevent people from voting. You have folks that are purging people off the rolls if they haven't voted for 3 consecutive elections. You have people who are intimidating folks at the polls. All of these are very concerted efforts to ensure that mainly the communities that we want to impact, BIPOC communities, voices and votes are suppressed. And that is heartbreaking, but it is not completely surprising because we are in a time where people are not afraid to fight dirty, to hit below the belt, to pull out every type of tactic that they have in order for them to win. And I don't think that they are going to be successful because I believe in us and I believe in the collective power of us coming together and being able to change these narratives. Some of the ways that we are as on the ground, and Melissa, if you can pull up the slide here and share with them where we are in Virginia specifically. And as Andrea mentioned before, we are a national organization. We have 14 democracy centers across the country in 9 different states. Here in Virginia, we are really focused on what is going on in many of the different counties. As you can see, as this map indicates, we have democracy centers where I am at here in Richmond, Virginia, Roanoke, as far west as Roanoke and Lynchburg, Virginia. You see, we also have many democracy centers that also cover smaller counties like Halifax, Pennsylvania, Brunswick, Lunenburg, Emporia, and Nottoway. This was a model that we created in order to better assist some of those rural communities who may not be getting the type of outreach and the contacts that they would normally be getting if they lived in a more urban or municipality that received a lot of support. We also have democracy centers. I don't see them reflected here on the map in Hampton Roads in Norfolk, Virginia, in Hampton, Virginia. We're also covering areas in Suffolk and Portsmouth. And then when you look at Northern Virginia, Andrea mentioned that there are 16 counties. I won't go through them all, but we used to think that, look at Northern Virginia as being a firewall, a place that would provide kind of a means of protection for us. And we saw in this last election that that was not the case. And so now we are making a very concerted effort of our own to be more active in those 16 counties. And really, again, using the digital infrastructure, the technology that we have, phone banking and texting, text banking. These are two very powerful tools that we use to reach those individuals, and making individuals aware of what's going on is one of the most important things that we can do to fight voter suppression. Because if they're not aware of what those restrictions and those limitations are and how to counter them, then there is no chance for them to be there at the day of election and voting and then having to contend with all those different challenges. One of the things that we are, constantly amplifying in our phone banking is go out and vote early, right? That is a great way to fight voter suppression, because if you're concerned about intimidation at the polls, or you're concerned about long lines at the polls, vote early. Also, there are mail-in ballots, provisional ballots that you can also use in order to get your vote in. One of the things that we do as far as partnering with other organizations is making sure that our seniors and anyone else in communities has rise to the polls. These are ways that we can ensure that we are working together, and there's strength in numbers. When we show up in the polls with numbers, we have a better chance and a better opportunity to really make our voices heard. And I think that a lot of what they are doing, and I say they because we are nonpartisan, but you know who the opposition is. A lot of what they are doing is fear tactics. And what we have to do is instill courage and confidence in our people at the polls. And we do that by informing them and making sure that they are aware of what we are aware of, and also by using any means that we can to make sure that they feel comfortable and confident by being able to cast their vote. One of our democracy centers is doing ballot literacy in order to educate those individuals. So I could go on. I don't want to go too much further over my time here. I know that we have some other folks here on the program. What I want to do right now is introduce you all to our Alabama Democracy Center leader, Mr. E.C. Rentz. And the reason why we are talking about Alabama right now is because they are one of our models that is really unique. They are led by, as Melissa spoke to earlier, the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, as well as there are 3 democracy centers across Alabama. So they cover a lot of ground and they do a lot of great work. And because Alabama has specific needs, they also have specific resolutions and ways to combat them. And I'll let EC speak to them because they are doing a great job in Alabama.
Thank you, Frank. Good evening, everyone. Actually, I'm in Huntsville Public Library tonight because we actually have a forum that's taking place right as I speak. And we are live streaming on YouTube so we can make sure that our whole community has an opportunity to view the candidates who have chosen to come and participate in this forum. Of course, we did not get all of the candidates, but that is to be expected. But just to give you a little info about Alabama, as Frank has stated, we're a little unique in that we have a network of 3 democracy centers that are associated with the Omega Psi Phi fraternity through our partnership with the Center for Common Ground. We have democracy centers here in Huntsville, one in Selma, and one in Mobile. And through those three democracy centers, we've been able to collaborate with all various nations throughout the state. Groups such as the Line 9, which is your African American sororities and fraternities, the NAACP, various church groups across the state, also various grassroots organizations. And this has been so helpful. Organizations such as Black Voters Matter, SOS, which stands for Save Ourselves, Lift Our Votes, and also various other groups across the state. So we've been very fortunate to, over a short period of time that we've been here, to be able to create a wide variety of assets in our utilization of our community. You see, we, from our inception with the Center for Common Ground, we know that we have 324,000 registered African Americans who did not vote in 2020. The first goal. Our second goal is to register as many as possible. We have that African Methodist Church, who has taken an initiative of registering 40,000 voters between now and October 23rd, when voter registration stopped. Also, we have a statewide opportunity going on right now, which is called Operation 2020, where back on National Voter Registration Day, we started by initiating a 20,000 registered voters incentive. And then our second 20,000 is to be by October 31st. Because of the tools that the Center for Common Ground provide us, such as phone banking, text banking, and of course, postcarding, we have been able to incorporate a lot of our groups to join us in the efforts of doing those activities. So we've been very proud and pleased with the involvement of our community. Because when we first started, the goal was to have everybody on the same page. And I think we have pretty much reached that. We know here in Alabama, even though some folks think that we're a red state, if we get folks out to vote on the policies and platforms and not personalities that exist within the state of Alabama, we know that we can see some changes here. So that has been our goal, that has been our efforts. Our leaders are Douglas Bonner, who is our program coordinator, Colin Pettaway III, who is a coordinator of the Selma Democracy Center, and James Alberhart, who is the coordinator of the Mobile Democracy Center. And of course, I'm the coordinator here in Huntsville. So I thank you for this opportunity to give you a little insight on what we're doing here in Alabama. I told Frank when he called that I was doing double duty. So that's what we do. We try to assist all of our democracy centers with whatever support that we can. So I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you, Frank.
Oh, EC, thank you. I know you had a lot going on tonight and you squeezed us in, but what you've done on the ground in Alabama is so important. So thank you for taking the time to share. If you've got some time to hang around for the questions and answers, that would be great. If not, we'll pass on any that we have to you. But I know they just touched the surface. And so really the purpose of these sessions is to be interactive and let you all as attendees really talk with the presenters. This is one model that may have some relevance and some meaning to what you're doing. I know, Linda, you mentioned something about some of the struggles you're having in Augusta County. I would like to make one comment before I start the Q&A, and that is that voter suppression can look like a lot of things, not what we normally think of. Some of the things that Andrea, Frank, and EC touched on, especially in rural areas like ours, where you don't have public transportation. There's miles and miles between the polling places. When you close down a polling place, that is impacting people's ability to be able to get there. And they tend to do it in areas that they don't want the people to get to vote. So that is one of the strategies that Andrea talked about, giving rides to the polls, that kind of thing, to make it easier, voting early, supporting vote by mail, no excuse vote by mail. And then also, we don't always have the digital infrastructure for people in rural areas like this to get the accurate information. So all of these types of tools are very important. And so as we open this up, if I can have each of you, starting with Andrea first, just quickly say, what are some of the ways and what does voter suppression look like to you in different forms that we may not recognize off the top of our heads?
Oh, thanks for that question, Melissa. In a lot of rural communities, voter suppression really looks like voter intimidation, and we really expect to see that this year. That we're reading about election officials, governors, various people who are recruiting people to stand at the polls and challenge voters, saying, are you registered to vote? Are you a citizen? Should you be voting? We really haven't seen that level of let's get really personal since the 1960s. Now that we've really lost the protection of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in most states, people are getting very, very bold with what they plan to do, and they're just saying it out loud. This is what we're going to do. We're going to intimidate election officials and voters. So that's one thing.
Wonderful. Frank, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have two. So I'll just grab, those two out the air here because there's so many. One of the things that we have been talking about recently is just the amount of assistance that individuals are being able to give potential voters or voters at the polls. That's being limited, how much help they can get. And so when I look at one of our democracy centers who is doing the ballot literacy initiative, I'm really supportive of that. We have to make sure that there are no barriers. And literacy, they know that they pick out our pain points, right? And they try to exploit them. And what we do is we try to provide resources. They do the opposite. They try to use them as some type of, and try to weaponize them, basically. And so if they know that we can't get to the polls, they shut it down. If they know that there are long lines, they try to make the wait even longer, right? Another thing that's really I guess kind of bothering me is the idea that gosh, I lost my train of thought there. But the voter suppression can, as Andrea said there, with getting folks to the polls is one way. Obviously, limiting the amount of support and help at the polls is another way. Voter intimidation. There is one more that I wanted to kind of cite there, but now it slipped my mind. But I do want to make sure that we do understand that in any of these tactics, there is a counter method, right? There is a counteraction that we can take, and see something, say something. Is one of those tools that we can use. And I don't want that to get overlooked because there are going to be, like Andrew said, there are going to be voter intimidation tactics that are going to be used openly at the polls. See something, say something will allow us to be able to report in real time and to actually take some actions on how to counter those. So I'll just stop there, and if it comes to mind during the Q&A session, I'll bring it back up.
I want to add something, and this is the Commonwealth of Virginia directly. On the State Board of Election website, there is a link that says early voting. When you go to that link, Virginia has 133 counties, and all 133 counties have early voting. When you go to that link, there are only 12 counties that show up. That is another form of voter suppression. Early voting locations are published exclusively on the internet. If you are poor and you can't afford the internet, if you are older, don't have a computer or the internet, if you are rural and there is no internet, how exactly are you supposed to find out where the early voting location is this time? So that's one of the things that we do at Center for Common Ground. Every contact with voters, postcard, text message, phone call, we not only give the voter a website, we give them a phone number in the event the internet is not available to them.
That is wonderful. And EC, I'm not sure how long you can stay with us, so I want to do a double hit for you, both what voter suppression looks like on the ground to you, but also Stephen had some questions specifically for you. I don't know if you can see those on your phone, about what, if any, involvement do the Alabama Democracy Centers have in the Alabama redistricting case now pending in the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, as far as voter suppression, we may be the lead in that because, of course, we don't have early voting, first of all. Second, if you can vote absentee, however, it's one of the most restrictive ways of voting because not only do you have to put your ballot in what they call a secret envelope before you put it in another envelope, but you also have to have it notarized. So back in 2020, when some of the restrictions were relieved or kind of subsided a little bit, we had such a large turnout that immediately the next year they put not only those restrictions, but many more. As far as our participation, we have been involved with the NAACP, who actually brought the suit against redistricting because they actually put in their counter proposal to the court system for redistricting, which would have given Alabama a second minority district. However, of course, that was overruled by the local courts. So it's moving on up. And it looks like when it was placed in the courts of appeals, the appeals court did overturn the lower court. So now the state of Alabama has again put in a appeal. So we're assuming that it's going to go to the Supreme Court. However, according to the numbers that are in Alabama, it's more evident that a second congressional district should be composed of majorities individuals. So that's where we are, and we are trying to provide as much information as possible throughout civic education and literacy program to make sure people understand what is important with that situation.
You've raised some excellent points there, EC, because I know in our particular county in Virginia, we still have requirements for a minimum number of majority-minority districts that we have to take into account and create in our redistricting. And if some of these things start getting overturned in the Supreme Court, those kind of voter protections are going to end in counties like ours, and hence you will get redistricting that does end up suppressing the vote again. Stephen, did that answer your questions, or did you have one more for EC?
Oh, I just wanted to mention that the case is in the Supreme Court. It was already had an oral argument. And it doesn't look good because the Supreme Court is apparently, you know, we don't know until they actually decide the case, has enough votes to say that you shouldn't consider race in terms of drawing congressional districts, which is completely the opposite of the intent and meaning of the Voting Rights Act, which basically says that you have to ensure that folks are not deprived of representatives of their choice by gerrymandering, so that, as in the case of Alabama, there's only one district where there's a majority of people of color, when in fact 27% of the state is African American.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So
well,
these-
not only that, I always say that gerrymandering is nothing but race. So that's just my opinion.
Yes, Linda, I know if you had some questions early on, said there were some issues you're struggling with in Augusta County. Did you want to share some of those?
Oh, yeah, hi, yeah. Well, you know, it's just that it's such a rural county and places don't have internet. So I was really surprised to hear that the early voting places are only posted on the internet. And I'm thinking that, you know, that's really awful. I didn't know that. But we do have a robust community. I actually live in the city, within the city limits of Stanton, which is pretty blue compared to Augusta County, which is pretty red. But the thing that bothers me is that we have a candidate running for Congress, Jennifer Lewis, for Virginia 06, and the Virginia Democratic Party, the state Virginia Democratic Party has not endorsed her, and Senator Mark Warner has not endorsed her, and she's running against that Ben Klein. Oh my God! But so I don't know why aren't these why isn't the state Virginia Democratic Party coming to the aid of Jennifer Lewis? I don't know. That's one thing that really bothers me. The other thing that I really liked was the fact that telling people to vote early, because I've been writing postcards for some of the local candidates for like school board and city council. And so one of the things I say is vote early, but I didn't realize how critical that could actually be. So that's the other thing. But we do actually have a pretty robust community engaged in trying to get people to vote and you know, getting the vote out and stuff like that. But the other thing I was wondering was wanted to say was about the Merrill case. So I listened to the oral arguments on that had to do with that wasn't really gerrymandering, but it was like the voting districts. And I was listening to the new Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and her arguments were just so good. So if you have a chance to listen to some of those oral arguments for some of these cases in the Supreme Court, that's always a helpful thing, I think. So anyway, but yeah, no, the early voting thing I think is very important. I think to get out and to tell people to do that.
Again, we are a nonpartisan organization. The problem that the candidates in the 9th district and the 6th district have is they haven't raised any money, which is why they have no official endorsements.
Okay. Rashad, I think you had a question next.
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking, you know, through this all, you know, I've done like canvassing and stuff, but I would say I definitely don't have, you know, the amount of information and knowledge in the background of, you know, voter suppression and just voting and, you know, all the regulations and stuff like, you know, our guests, the speakers here have. So I guess my question, and I guess I want to open this question up to anybody, particularly the people, I guess the non-Center for Common Ground people who might not have all this information, because I want to look at it from a like everyday regular person point of view. What would you guys say, and anyone can answer this, what would you guys say that from your point of view, the biggest struggle when it comes to voting or voter suppression, whether it's personally or from what you see within the, you know, your local community, you know, what tools, what, you know, information do you think like yourself or the community needs, you know, it's kind of something to kind of just bring it back to like your regular everyday person of, you know, what could help voter suppression or just voting in general, particularly for like midterm elections, which don't have as much participation as the general elections. So I just wanted to open that question up to everyone.
Looks like Stephen's got his hand up. Did you want to tackle that one, Stephen?
No, this was a different matter, so I'll, unless you want me to ask my question.
Did we just lose Andrea? Let me see first if any of the other guests wanted to respond to the question that Rashad had. Does anyone else want to answer
I
that?
will respond, then I'm gonna have to go back to this
Okay.
forum. One of the things that we've noticed is that civic education and literacy plays a very, very important part because they have removed basically literacy from the school system. You'd be surprised how many individuals, young and old, don't have a clue about how the system actually works. And another thing is because all of the bills that have been passed, the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure, and reduction plan, that folks don't really know how all of that came about. Also, in our state, when we have voting in the primary, you can only vote for one or the other party. And some folks don't realize that that's just for the primary, and that during the general election it's opened up so you can vote for whoever you want to. So that has been our main efforts, to try to inform, try to educate our populace of what advantages they have and what power they have by being able to participate in civic engagement in their local community, which in turn pass up to the state and also the nation. And I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, but I'm going to have to bid a fair adieu at this point so I can go back in and finish ours.
Thank you so much, EC. You are awesome.
Thank you too.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
everyone.
EC.
Sure.
Yes. And I did want to respond to Rashad's question as well. And from what EC said, one of the things, I think he's absolutely correct. And we see that push, unfortunately, in Virginia, where they're trying to get away from teaching actual history and the actual facts. And that is one thing that when I've gone out under the Democracy Center umbrella with our registrar into the high schools, for instance, or some of the day centers, things like that, to do voter education in a nonpartisan way. One of the things that our registrar does very well is he gives a brief history of voting rights. And it is really astounding when you put it in that timeline and some of these young people to realize that it wasn't that long ago that women literally got the rights to vote, that minorities got the rights to vote, that, non-landowners got the rights to vote. So that is a very important component to it. And I think that that's getting lost in the generations that have not come up with the same kind of civics training that we do. So I do think that is one avenue that we can do to combat it. Did we want to go to Stephen?
Yes, I put this in the chat, but this is a question directed at Andrea and Frank or anyone else who has any other information. I don't know how many people have noticed these reports in the media that about 171,000 people were registering at the DMV in Virginia, and somehow these registrations have not been entered into the rolls in Virginia yet. Does anybody know what the status of that is and what's going on?
No, but I know that my son, who moved a year and a half ago, and I was with him at the Delaware DMV when he switched his voter registration, is still on the Virginia rolls. So I don't know what's being done about that. Does anyone else?
If I may, hi everyone. My name is Ethar Hassan. I'm actually from the Democratic Party of Virginia with the voter protection team. And we actually got a call about this, I believe it was last week, from a voter who basically had been purged off the rolls, or they were made inactive after he had changed his registration from, I believe it was Albemarle County to Montgomery. And he was communicated to by his general registrar about the situation, and it was fixed. So he is now currently a registered voter. He's back on the rolls. But what I've been told is that registrars are reaching out to these voters that have been affected individually, and it seems to be getting solved. But the concern now is that all of these registrars' offices have to go ahead and file these registrations before the October 17th deadline. So I know some of them are advocating or kind of pushing elect to extend that deadline. I don't know what the likelihood of that happening is, but it is a conversation that is happening now.
Is it a recommendation that you would have that as part of any of our outreach in any of our areas that we ask people to check their voter registration at this point to allow them time to see if they can get it addressed or fixed?
Absolutely. I definitely recommend everybody checks the registration status. If I honestly tell some of the voters to check the Department of Elections website. They can also go to iwillvote.com and check their information there. Really helpful resource for voters. But definitely encourage voters to check that information. And if they do see any inaccuracies or if they have concerns, to get in contact with their registrar's office as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. And Bob, I had seen your hand go up briefly. Did you have a question or a statement?
It was just in relation of 170,000. I think it's around 100,000 now. And what's going on is the registrars are hard pressed to get these things, this backlog taken care of. So apparently these have not been lost. They've been pushed to the registrars, the appropriate registrars, but it just increased their backlog tremendously. And the technical problem that caused it, apparently, with a grain of salt, I accept that it was fixed, but that doesn't fix the actual registrations that may or may not have gotten in or may not get in an appropriate time. Now, one thing that I think some people, you can check your registration to see where it is, push them along a little bit, but the state sure as hell isn't given any more resources to take care of this problem because new registrations are not good for the party that shall remain nameless. So for what it's worth.
Okay, thank you. Do you have time for one more question?
Can I just clarify something,
Oh,
Melissa?
yes.
Yeah, there is now same-day registration. So if anybody is in a situation where they show up at the polls, or if they are encouraged to show up at the polls and they have some doubt whether or not their registration went through, they can still register and vote on election day. The problem there is they'll probably be required to have a provisional ballot. But if they're not otherwise, if they're eligible to register, which they should be, and they thought they registered at the DMV and it hasn't yet been recorded, then their vote should be counted. Now, whether or not that is all going to happen in every jurisdiction is, of course, the question. But I think we, with the same day voter registration, I believe it is accurate to say that they don't have to all be on the books as of October 17th if they show up and vote.
Okay, thank you.
And register and vote on the same day on election day.
Yes, it will have to be provisional if it's on election day, but it's, at least in our county, we've been told it will be handled a little bit differently than a typical provisional ballot. It will definitely be counted. Pody, I think you had a question?
Yes, thank you. It's a great honor to be on this call. A couple of observations. Good to see Ms. Miller again. We've worked together in the past, and very pleased to be on again. A couple of observations. One about purging of voter rolls. I've been made aware of a strange situation in the Virginia Beach area where a independent candidate turned in over 1,000 signatures and only 600 were not rejected. This seemed rather troubling. I don't know what's going on there, but that's just a comment. With regard to what was raised about civic education, that is so true. Out here in the western edge of Virginia, the example was raised of, do people understand how ARPA funds came to be? Now, those of you who've organized with me know modern monetary theory, the explanation for how that happened, how student loans were able to be canceled, how Trump was able to do his tax cuts. These things reveal the power of the vote that could really motivate people to come forward. But it's very difficult to get this civic education across. It's not just teaching history in the elementary schools. It goes to all places where you find vested interests who have a stake in some pre-built brand already, even within the primaries on both sides. And that's really been a blight here in the western part of Virginia. My area, Harrisonburg, Rockingham County, Augusta County, is why we're not seeing the kind of voter enthusiasm that we have seen in the past. My city council election, I'm not optimistic that we're going to have good turnout there. A question that I would put to you in this spirit, to anybody who can handle this, with regard to the confidence of voters. Can somebody speak about the role of election audits in this? The checking to see if there are errors on ballots, if there are errors in the machines. I know we've had a big controversy with the Trump administration really abusing that. Can folks talk a little bit about what are the pluses and minuses, pitfalls, things to watch out for in election audits?
Andrew or Frank, you want to tackle that one?
I got that. Virginia has very auditable paper, and by law, it was my lawsuit that required it. Every county must retain their ballot images. So we can go back and look at the ballot images. When you put your paper ballot into a scanner, the paper becomes the backup, and the copy of the ballot that the scanner takes becomes the primary, because that is really what the machine is counting. Before our lawsuit in 2017, many Virginia counties were destroying and or not maintaining the ballot image. Every state has, some states are using different machines. Other states are using paper ballots. Elections are falling under the purview of state rules and regulations. Some states have much better rules than others. Some states pay attention to their rules while others don't. So it gets very, very interesting. Virginia, because we vote exclusively on paper, we have very auditable elections. I worked to make sure of that in 2017.
And thank you, because that does make me feel secure as an election official. I know what's going on behind the scenes, and we do have that audit trail backup. Bob, we will fit you in for one last question, and then no, you're waving off.
Well, my question, it doesn't have to be answered particularly, but it's about the purging of the voter rolls, because it just seems to me that I have a right to vote, and someone takes away that right because I chose not to vote in 2 federal elections. And I don't understand exactly what the legal basis is for that. I understand the administrative necessity of trying to keep track and get rid of the people that move out of state or die or whatever. But it just confounds me that these things are done. And with all of our election rules, this being a big part of it, there is no harm if you screw up royally and you do this stuff, throw these things in the trash can, get rid of them after the fact, doesn't matter. It's not like you go back and say, well, you won the election illegally, so you don't get to be this, that, or the other thing. No, we don't do that. So there really isn't a penalty for encouraging people to screw up. Said my piece.
And I love your piece, Bob. I love the way that American laws are written, especially regarding elections. Anything not prohibited by federal law falls within the purview of the states. And the states have been very, very clever in finding areas where federal law did not expressly say you must or you shall not. So when they didn't say you got to do it or you can't do it, well, all right, now that leaves room for us to try some things. And that's one of the things that we see, because I agree, Bob, if we really and truly had a right to vote, then that means we would have a right not to vote as well. In America, some people have the ability to vote. It is not a right. We've got to change the Constitution for that.
It's a great point.
And make it explicit.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Andrea. It's just frustrating because I can read the legal text, I can read the arguments, I can read the decisions, but it just doesn't make sense that I lose a right simply by not exercising it. I have a lot of rights that I do not exercise, and they are not taken from me. They live with me and they die with me, but I always have them.
That is an excellent perspective and an excellent point. I know I hadn't thought of that. We are a little bit past the hour, so I would like to give Andrea and Frank a chance for any last comments before we turn it over to Rashad to wrap up. I do want to let you know, Andrea did put her slides, the link to that in the chat, but I will also send those out with a follow-up email to everyone, along with any of the other information that was shared in this. So Andrea and Frank, I will let you all say your comments, and then I will turn it back over to our chair, Rashad, to close out.
Oh, all my neighbors are on the internet, and I live in rural Virginia. So right now my internet sucks. So that's why my camera is off. The presentation I put in the chat is my voting rights presentation, and it's all about the Voting Rights Act and how we got where we got because they failed to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So I was just so delighted to be here and to join so many of you so very, very interested in voting. And it really and truly is something where it is of extreme value, and we must fight to protect our ability to vote. We must advocate and convert our ability to vote to a true right to vote in the Constitution, where it simply says every citizen of the United States of voting age shall have the fundamental right to vote in any election held in the jurisdiction in which they reside. Boom. That's it. So if you're a voting age and you're a citizen, you can vote. We don't care whether you got a felony in your past, you didn't vote in the last 10 elections. It's very specific.
Amen. Thank you. Frank, how do you top that?
I can't. I won't even try. I think when she dropped the mic, she broke it. So I'm not even sure if you can hear me right now.
We can.
But no, I would say that, just to reiterate some of the things that we touched on, vote early. As Andrea put in the chat, check your registration 3 times a year at least. Get others to check their registration. And lastly, just to cut it short here.
Oh, you muted yourself. Don't cut that short.
Yeah, that's the wrong button. I just put in the chat the email address, excuse me, the website address for the Center for Common Ground. Find a democracy center. Work with us. We're here in Virginia. We're 9 states across the country. We help with getting folks rides to the poll. We help with civic education and training. We help with basically just anything that you can think of as far as providing support. And so partner with us, work with us. We will do the same with you to help strengthen those communities.
Okay, thank you. And you actually preempted the slide I got up here for Rashad.
Perfect.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for participating tonight. Andrea, Frank, Melissa, thank you all for your participation and bringing, the Center for Common Ground to join us here. This conversation has been absolutely amazing. Again, this is RASR's second program event. And, just like the first one, just hearing the conversation here, even looking in the conversation in the chat, it just brought up so many questions and so many ways to kind of advocate for this work, and just different ways to think about what we can do to help. And, ultimately, that's what, this event and all of our events will be about. I want to make sure we leave this program tonight and look at it as a call to action. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. All of us are here for a reason. We're interested in this work, regardless if we have expertise in it or, zero expertise in it. We're here because we have an interest. And so, it takes people like us to really go out there in the community and do that work. And so, that's why, we're honored to have the Center for Common Ground here as, an organization that has the infrastructure, who can do this work, has the experience, has people on the ground who does this kind of work. And, and to say this, of course, we always invite any, other organization that does this kind of work, not saying that Center for Common Ground is the way to do it, but it's a way to do it, but it's a great way to do it. And, we're all here for the cause, not the organization, not the group. So ourselves as RASR Center for Common Ground, in whatever way you want to help, it doesn't have to be, our way. We just want the work to be done. So again, Andrea and Melissa and Frank gave the contact information for us as RASR for Center for Common Ground. So yeah, please contact us, if you're interested in doing this work. And then finally, I want to close out, just to reiterate what, again, RASR is about. And just to go over, really, I just want to say, in this point of our organization, we definitely want to open up to more participation, membership. So, I know a lot of you guys here in this meeting, but some of you I don't know, and I would love to invite you guys to, join RASR, join our community, again, help out in any way you can. So, along with voting, our other pillars, I'll just go over them again, but economics and financial, education, outreach and partnership, health and wellness, housing and eviction, justice and law enforcement, legislation and policy, and reparations and redress. So again, those are like our main levels, our main action items we have here. But even outside of this, if you feel as if, you want to participate and bring something else to the table, another topic to the table, we invite that. I always go back and look at myself, maybe like 2 years ago, before I started really getting involved with things. I knew I wanted to be involved with something. And, I met, a lot of you guys here in the group within that, and, formed the organization and, be able to get that work out there and, connect with people who want to do the same thing and do that work. So I'm inviting you guys to RASR, and I'm sure Andrea, you wouldn't mind at all people coming to Center for Common Ground. So if you find, any want to do this kind of work, you are definitely invited. Again, you have our contact information. We have our website that's put in there. You can fill out a membership form and get on the mailing list, and we can give you all the information for that. But I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight, spending your Tuesday night with us. It is voting time, voting season. So this is a very important conversation for this time of year. We got to energize everybody. Lastly,
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Exactly. So this is the time to have these conversations. And again, action item, get this out to your networks, to your communities, to get them energized and ready to vote next month in 4 weeks. And then I also want to cordially invite you guys for our event. Should be next month in November. We're going to have discussions on marijuana redress with the legalization of marijuana, recently in Virginia, and just kind of throughout the country. We're seeing it up more and more. So we're going to have an event led by our very own Stephen Spitz here and Shirley Jenwright as RASR. So have a conversation, similar to this on that, and how we can use these, recent legalizations of marijuana to really, redress, kind of hits our redress and reparations pillar, but use that for, how to redress and, African-American people of color communities, hits on, justice and economics and all that. So that's our plan for our next event there. We would love to have you guys there. Again, invite your networks, and, we'll keep doing this. And again, we would love to have you guys join us for the work you do. And again, I appreciate all of you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rashad.
you. Good program.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having
guys.
us. We appreciate you and all the work that RASR has done. Look forward to. I'm a little biased because I am a board member, but if there is another great organization other than Center for Common Ground that I would recommend you join, RASR would be one of them. So get involved. We are all together in this effort, and just thank you so much for your support and all the work that you've been doing in the community.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Great program.
Thank you, guys. We'll keep in touch for sure.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
See you
everyone.
guys.
Be safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.